I, I love Great Britain. So if I
Right.
can, I come to Great Britain.
Yeah.
And with that, we are live.
Oh,
Welcome.
hey.
Welcome to Glossop Improv Conversations. We have some wonderful improvisers with us this evening. There may be another wonderful improviser joining us at some point. Jonah is meant to be on his way, but who knows, he might not be able to make it. But I mean, if he does turn up, then we will just treat this like we would an actual improv guessing game, and we will try to give him clues that he is actually meant to be a dragon, and he's being assisted by Tony Blair in stealing the crown jewels. Does that sound all right to everyone? Yeah. Okay.
I
I'm
will,
just
yeah.
making a note.
Even in the
Dragon.
before times, I still forgot.
Tony Blair.
Tony Blair.
We won't really put him through that. Oh, and with that, Jonah has arrived.
Just in time.
Hi, Jonah. Welcome.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Yeah, we just made a little joke that we were going to endow you with some things that you would have to guess because we were waiting for you to arrive. So, you know, if you want to make any guesses about who you are and what famous person you've been traveling with and any of those, then feel free to just pepper them throughout the conversation.
Oh yeah, I've been traveling with lots of famous people lately. Mostly in body bags, I guess.
Whoa.
Whoa, it's escalated.
Excellent guessing. But all of this is an aside. This is Glossop Improv Conversations. It's an opportunity for me to talk to some wonderful improvisers about their improv origins and their improv inspirations. And feel free to put any questions that you have for our lovely improvisers into the comments. I will keep an eye on them as best I can. I'm not the best at multitasking. I'm just going to put that up there right now. But I will try to ask these questions of these wonderful people. But now I'm going to give them a little opportunity to introduce themselves. So we will start with Jess O'Neill.
Hi. I'm Jess O'Neill. So I am an improviser based in Liverpool in the United Kingdom. I've been improvising for some years. It's hard because I don't really know whether to count last year. So I'm going to go ahead and say like 10-ish years between the UK and New Zealand. And I'm currently playing with a company called Casino Improv. And I just got on a Queen City comedy team, which is really exciting because they're awesome. And with a team that broadcasts on the Pack Theatre, and it's a choose your own adventure team called Disaster Time.
Nice. That sounds very exciting. And Rachel, your turn next.
Hello, I'm Rachel. I'm based in Manchester in the UK. I am part of Comedy Sports UK. So it's Comedy Sports with a Z. I'd be hung out to dry if I didn't mention that. I have been doing improv for 20 years. There's been some gaps in there, university, etc. But yeah, there you go. It's a little bit about me.
Thank you very much. Jonah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonah. I'm based in London, UK. I guess I've also been improvising for a amount of years, almost 20, I think, just about. And the companies that I work with the most are Hoopla Improv here in London, and also the Nursery, where I produce a bunch of our shows as well.
Lovely. And Mauro.
Hello, I'm Mauro from Turin, Italy. I've been improvising for the last 8 years, 18 years, 18 years. Yes. And I'm the artistic director of Halogenis, which is a little production in Turin, my town. That's it.
That's all we need to know. Fantastic. Yeah. Wonderful. Oh, well, it's so lovely to have you all here. And yeah, so great to meet you, Mauro. I don't think I've come across you in any workshops or anything like that as yet, but I'm very intrigued to see what you do. So I'd like to start off by asking you, what made you try improv for the very first time? So I'm going to let whoever the idea comes to first. Mauro.
Yeah, it's very simple question, because what made me try improv for the very first time was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine. She's like my sister, and she knows me very well, and she said, you have to try this. So I tried. That's it. and she was very right, as always. So
Oh, yeah, it's
that's
nice
why I began.
it's nice to have somebody that knows you and says you would be good at improv. It gives you a lot of confidence to give it a try.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I'm curious, Mauro, is that somebody who was an improviser at the time and she thought, oh, you know, who else would be good at this? Mauro?
She is an actress, and she just knew improv because she was in a class, and
Cool.
she just finished the first class, and she said, no, that's something for you. So
Nice.
That's really nice.
It's always interesting to think whether, like, when a friend recommends somebody to improv, whether like, you'll be great at this, you already do this, or you need to do this in your life.
Yeah. Shut up and go take an improv class.
Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tired of hearing your bits all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I had a high school teacher who was magnificent. So she was our drama teacher, Elizabeth Watkin Grubb. She's from the Isle of Man. So obviously, being in a very small town in New Zealand, we found her very exotic. And she wore a lot of velvet and is just like an outstanding like member of the community just in general. And she managed to sort of siphon off the equivalent of like GCSE and A-level drama into being really improv and monologue heavy and just general storytelling heavy. And it just really, really changed the way that we saw the way that we could participate in theatre, because it was a small town that didn't have a ton of theatre or access to the arts in general. And so it felt really new and inclusive for us. And by seventh form, so by our last year of high school, so that's like 17, 18, you know how schools do school exchanges? Like they do sports exchanges. So we managed to, with this other school in Christchurch, to get a theatre sports team rotated into that, so that we could like go away and perform and like play against other high schools in different cities and stuff. So yeah, it's that one woman, Elizabeth Watkin Grubb, who did that.
One woman.
That one incredible creature.
Yeah. That's all it takes though. Just one person. Rachel, how about you?
I mean, mine's on a similar ilk. So I started back in my hometown, which is Chorley, and they have an incredible theatre there, an incredible amateur dramatics company, and an even better, dare I say it, youth theatre based there. And when I was growing up, the leader of that was a lady called Bron Edge, and she went to America for a couple of years because her parents moved over there. So they were based in Milwaukee, or just outside. And while she was there, she saw this show called Comedy Sports and spoke to the owner, which is a guy called Dick Chudnow. And he gave her a massive file, which was like this, and just went, there are all our games, enjoy. She came back to the UK, started the youth theatre again. She's like, let's try some of these games. So we never actually went to a class. We learned improv from a book. We did our first show for Charity for Children in Need 2007. No, 2001. Yeah, Rachel, it's a long day. 20 years ago. And yeah, it's like one of our short form improv games was about 10 minutes long, because we didn't know how to call it for ages and ages. She thought a stopwatch was just a prop, so we never actually timed anything. Yeah, and then it was just that, and we just kept growing and growing, and then it became more of a regular thing.
Brilliant.
Rana?
How about
Love Bronya from Manchester. Shout out Bronya.
you?
Hey.
But they're actually doing a show now, so whoop whoop to them.
See you guys in 45 minutes.
I suppose shall I dig it? Well, mine is a sort of on again, off again, on again kind of story. So I'm an actor. I went to drama school and did all of those things, and like Rachel, sort of a lot of youth theatre before then. And anybody who's ever trained as an actor, and then also done what we call improvisation, will know that that's not improv what they teach you in drama school. Or what they show you in school. And so I don't know whether this is a direct result, but I definitely 100% despised it. And anytime that anyone used the word impro, I just thought, oh God, no, that's that thing where somebody tells me 15 things that I have to do in a scene. And then at the end of the scene, we know it's the end because somebody says, and it was all a dream, or, and then we woke up. That's the thing I thought improv was when I was a teenager. And it took until drama school that I think I had some sort of project. One of the first sort of books on our kind of reading list was Keith Johnston's, and at that time he happened to be more than once a year doing his UK workshops where he'd come back over. So my first proper legit improv workshop was with Keith.
Wow.
And then that's what it is.
Not shabby.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, when was that? Maybe, yeah, very early noughties, I guess. And just spiraled like a ball of snow rolling down a hill. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you mentioned about the difference in the kind of improvisation that you were taught at drama school. So what was that like? What did they see as improvisation?
Well, I suppose this is this is no slight to Bron bringing back the huge kind of plethora of games with her from the States, but it was sort of improv as taught from a book, and it was improv for process. I mean, I think a lot of the sort of acting and theatre world still are sort of fairly ignorant to our entirely humongous industry, to use a kind of cold word. And so it's still sort of seen as like improv is as a process to achieve something, like to achieve a devised theatre piece, or to work on kind of Stanislavski style kind of before time scenes with your characters and things like that. And it was very, very heavily structured by the teachers, no real room for creativity. And you're often told, no, that's not the right way to do it.
That was not the outcome that we wanted from that improvisation.
Yeah.
But I think that the goal is quite different, because the goal when you are improvising a character, for example, in an acting school, is to go deeper into this character. So you have lots of rules because, everything is different. So maybe they call it improv, but maybe they should call it some character improv, or some object different. Okay, call it banana.
Mauro, I think you're completely onto something there. It's probably, I think it's a semantic problem. It's like what we do and we know is as improvisation bears not very much resemblance to what most of the world thinks improvisation is, right? So I mean, we're probably the people that could turn it into banana.
Yeah.
If anyone.
I think also, like, because by definition, what they're asking you to do is improvise as well, but much in the same way that you would in other disciplines, so in music or in cooking or something like that. It's difficult because it's a word that we've appropriated into a very specific art form.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will call Keith Johnston to say, now we decided we call it banana from now on.
Okay. Sorry,
Keith-
I got kicked out of that
Keith.
WhatsApp group. I can't call Keith Johnston anymore. It's so disappointing.
Just kept suggesting too many stupid names for improvisation.
Yeah.
You're out. So I want to talk a bit about what your first kind of improvisation class felt like, right? Because I think it can be quite an overwhelming experience. I mean, we obviously all stuck with it, but what was it? What was the first class like, or the first few classes?
The thing that excited and terrified me the most, and this is referencing Keith again, give him a ring, is what he talks about in his book about the sort of right answer generator that we sort of we're trained from birth or throughout school. We're conditioned, even if we don't have the right answer, to pull a face as if we do, because if a child in the classroom's like, I don't know, then they're told off, but it's completely legitimate to not have the answer. And I think the dawning that upon me that this was a craft or an art form where you can really forget about the kind of getting it right. And some of the games that I remember being most exciting were things like new choice or jump and justify exercises, where your brain doesn't have the option of pre-planning and kind of looking for a good or a right answer, and you fully kind of feel immersed in that moment of like, oh, I'm making this up. And yeah, and that sort of joy of the sort of feedback loop from the rest of the class being like, yeah, and it's fun.
Brilliant. Anyone else have any?
I took a lot of time off improv. So I had done what I now realize in high school was very Johnstonian theatre sports. And I have this fantastic book that's called Theatre Sports Down Under, which is just when all of these New Zealanders and Australians just had at it the few times that he would go that far. And so that was fairly technical and wonderful in a very safe, freeing space with not a lot of performance, because it would often just either go into us doing like short form tournaments with people, or it would be, as Jonah and Mauro were saying before, like a bigger study for devising a piece or as part of a play or something like that. So then when I came to the UK about 6 years ago and went to, I think it was an impropriety drop-in, impropriety here in Liverpool. And it was really, I went to the first one and it felt quite overwhelming because it was super short form and joke telling. And I think after playing for a few years, I've realized I love short form, but I'm not especially good at it. Like I just don't think I'm as sort of good at those games as much as I much prefer doing scenes and longer pieces. And yeah. So I think that going to those first couple of jams reminded me why I liked classes a little bit more, and having like a little bit more permission to be sincere, I think. So I found that a little bit overwhelming, because even though it wasn't a class as such, it was coming back into this space and feeling, yeah, a little peculiar about it, because it sort of felt like a panel show almost. Yeah. And it was fun. Yeah. And they were doing really great work as well, but it just sort of threw me a little off kilter a bit, I think.
Mauro, how about you? What was your first class like?
Well, my first class was like kindergarten. we were all adults because we were about 26, 27 years old was the median, and we wanted to play a lot, and that was like kindergarten. We had these teachers who were very fun, and we just look at the other, just like, hey, let's go play. Hey, oh, you rock. Oh, you're very cool. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And nobody felt inappropriate. Is that the right word? So we were quite united in that class, and that was beautiful. For some months, of course, then someone went away and blah blah blah, and that's life. But the first few months, I remember those just like one happy time in my life. We passed the time after the class, the day after, just writing emails and SMS, because there was no WhatsApp or whatever. So we passed a long time writing each other to say, hey, yesterday was fantastic, I can't wait for the next week. Okay, so that was my first class, and I think that reminds me of being a different teacher. When I talk to my students, I always think about that me, and I think about that beautiful feeling to stay there, to be there with my class. Okay, and well, that's it.
That's really lovely that that's something that still kind of drives you as a teacher, trying to recreate that feeling for other people as well, and
yes, of course,
other people had as much fun as you did when you started.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Wonderful. What about you, Rachel?
I'm racking my brain, because as I mentioned earlier, like, ours was not necessarily like I went to a class and I was taught something. The first, so I just explained, so kind of like what Jess was saying with comedy sports, which is anywhere near theatre sports. They have, so it's predominantly American, so there's like 26, 27 cities in America that all have different teams, and so they host like a championship in a city each year. And so the first year that I went was in 2005 or 2004, and it was in LA, and it was literally like 4 people from Chorley. I was 21 at the time, and it was like, no one could understand us because we were so broad. Chorley, like, I hasten to say this, but it's like Peter Kay, like, my accent has toned down since then. And people just couldn't understand. But my first workshop was a Shakespeare workshop with a gentleman called Rick Steadman, and it was amazing, like, just to kind of have somebody who had that knowledge and was applying his like Shakespeare knowledge but then into improv. And I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. And then my next one was at Stella Adler, and it was like, I'm walking into this place to be taught how to improvise different voices. And as a 21-year-old in a room with predominantly older people, not necessarily male, I was so out of my depth. So, and I was like trying to make notes on everything, and I was trying to make notes, and somebody just leaned over, and a wonderful gentleman called Edward Trout, and he was just like, stop making notes, write words and just experience it. Like, because I was making minute notes, I was like, I want to retain all of this, and it was like, no, just experience it all, just take it all in, and go think about it afterwards, write it up afterwards, but right now just experience it. And I do a bit of teaching, and I kind of hope that, like Mauro was saying, like try and install that kind of way into my teaching. But yeah, the first one was like ridiculously like yeah.
It's
Yes.
I often think, like, lately, since we've sort of adapted to a new way of teaching, I'm reminded of like you were saying, those kind of early days of again, of like obsessing of getting it right, and like writing like copious amounts of notes and notes and notes, because that's like a comfort, isn't it? It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
the instructor has given this note or that note or whatever, that must be the correct way to do improv, right? And as teachers, we now, I mean, I'm obviously totally open to people taking notes, but you always sort of look over a little bit and make sure they're not like obsessively writing too much, because then, as you say, you know, they're not able to kind of experience the thing. But this is weird thing where, like, we as experienced improvisers know that you'll get a lot more if you sort of ditch the notebook and just kind of be present in the thing and risk kind of falling flat on your ass. But when you're at the beginning, you need comfort from being able to say, okay, there must be a right way to do this, and that kind of internal fight between the two.
Yeah, and I think it's like a learning pattern that's been ingrained in us, that the correct way to learn something is to write notes about it, because then you will remember everything you should remember about that thing. And it's like, this is a different thing. This is more like sport. This is like, you know, learning to run or something in a way that works for you. It's like you can look into the mechanics of it, and you can theorize about it, but the only way you're going to know whether this particular style, this particular thing works for you, is to just do it and see what happens.
So like, this is an example of like taking notes from one of the workshops. So it's notes, little bit of notes, and then right at the bottom it just says, just think tits.
Just think tits.
I mean, it's a lifelong lesson that I
Someone called Keith Johnston.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say as well, I wonder if there is a sense of, so like people shit on improv a lot, and so there's this idea of, and they're all incorrect, so there's this idea of almost sort of legitimizing it, and the way that something is legitimized is by making it academic and technical and official, so that you can sort of defend it with its own minutia. And it shouldn't happen, but I wonder if that's sort of why people feel super compelled to sort of capture the technicality of what they're learning, because you can't pull up feelings in an argument about how legitimate something is as an art form, I suppose.
I went to university to do drama and performance studies, and it was the first year that it was being run. So in reality, the second and third year hadn't been written at that point when I started my degree. And in the second year, I was like, oh, I do improv. And they were like, oh, no, we don't do that. It's like, oh, okay, well, you know, these are the, oh, no, we're going to do, you know, I'm going to send you to a singing class. And it's like, well, this would be really cool. We don't do improv here. And then I find out, like, 4 years after I leave, I went to London South Bank, and their theatre was being built, which was the Edric Hall, the Edric Theatre, and the bloody nursery was there for a time, and I was like, is that but my drama lecturer at the time was just like, no, improv, they just associated it with hot seating. So like, oh, sit down, we're going to ask you 10 questions about your character, and it's like, no.
And even the people that sort of do have a kind of a vague concept of improv as an outsider, as much as, like, I think we've all said how much we love short form and like all the kind of fun of that, is like there's a very particular perception of it from Whose Line, of course. And I know that we've all done it, and we all hate having to explain the thing that we do by going, have you seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? Well, it's not like that, but it sort of is. I've got a fun game where I now, if a student asks about Whose Line Is It Anyway, I pretend that I've never heard of it. It's just a really fun game just for ourselves. What's that?
No? Yeah.
Sounds fun. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Mauro, you're on mute.
Yes, of course. Here in Italy, we have several problems with perception of improv. First of all, because if you go into the south of Italy, they always improvise in life. So if you talk about improvisation with people from the south, they say, yes, I know, it's my life. So what's new in what you do? So and they all have a long traditional theater, which is almost improvised. So there is a long conception coming from the commedia dell'arte, which is, it's just like that's improvisation. And second, we have a TV show. We had a TV show which was not improvised at all, but they sold them as improvisation. So if you go, if you go to people and say, I do improvisation, they say, oh, just like Ale and Franz, which is a joke in the improvisation community now, because yes, Jess, like Ale and Franz. No, it's not Ale and Franz. Okay, so just like Whose Line, but you're lucky, man. Trust me, you're lucky because you have Whose Line Is It Anywhere? We have Ale and Franz, which is.
Isn't it such a relief that Middleditch and Schwartz got a Netflix special now, so we can say that?
Yes. But the second question is, so you do that show like them? No. If I was in Netflix now, no, I don't do the same thing. No, I'm not so famous and I have not that money. So no, I don't do the same thing. No, okay. Ale France.
We'll go. Yeah. We've had a question from Tom Short, who Rachel will know, and Jess possibly will know as well. And he says, how do you make improv bigger in the theatre and the arts and make the wider arts take notice of improv? So it's a little bit of kind of what we've touched on in the previous answers.
I think there's two things there, which is like to play devil's advocate to what Jess was saying before about kind of coming at improv from an academic point of view, is the one thing that I don't know whether it needs to happen, but there's small sporadic bits of work using improvisation in mental health context, right? But ultimately, there probably has to be more academic literature and more kind of quantifiable studies into the use of improvisation, both as a training tool and as a kind of life skill and all the rest of it, before I think as a person who works in kind of university and kind of academic scenarios as well, it feels legitimized in that sense, in that Laban, technique is legitimized, and Stella Adler and so on, and anything else spinning out of Stanislavski. So I think that's part of it. And the other thing is, in terms of like mainstream success, I don't know if that's what Tom was sort of talking about, feels, and I'm one of the main culprits here, is that the big thing is like, hey, you don't know what improv is, or you don't think you like improv? Well, here's an improvised version of X. Here's an improvised version of insert intellectual property here, or a thing that you already know and probably like and would buy a ticket to see in a 400-seater theatre, but it happens to be improvised. What will that be like? So that I think is the sort of heart of where it's growing at the moment. We've got Ostentatious with their Radio 4 show, and the Showstoppers with the Olivier Award, which is the highest accolade in theatre, and a bunch of other kind of things that they've done. So it feels like we're on the path.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Mauro, you go.
No, go.
I'm my other job. I'm trying really hard not to say my real job or my muggle job, because it's just like, no, this is what I'm doing now. This is who I am now. But the job that pays me money is I'm a producer and a programmer. And so whenever we get shows that are very clearly improvised, and especially some of the slightly shiny ones, so like Noise Next Door, in all of their sort of literature that they send out, they never seem to mention that it's improvised, even though that is ultimately one of the biggest pulls when you're sat in that show. They'll say spontaneous, they'll say all of these other things that you can identify as being improvised, but they generally won't say it for that type of show. And I know that when people get super excited about like big improviser names, it's usually, and I'm thinking like specifically in like a lot of North American improvisers that everybody really enjoys. They all started an improv and then got into a show written by Mike Schur, because they realized, oh, these are the types of performers that we want to cast. And then so it's just sort of their responsibility, your Amy Poehler's and your Tina Fey's, to come back and say, oh, by the way, this came from years and years of improv and teaching and studying. So it's almost like this kind of weird retroactive thing. We're all sort of consuming the fruits of improv's labor, but many years later in the form of a sitcom or something like that. So I think it's these people who just a way to sort of see improv as not being a stepping stone, such as it is. A way to sort of figure out how to get into comedy, or how to get into comedy writing, or that sort of thing.
And I totally agree with you, mate. And I will add that there's another way to make people know what is improv, which are festivals. And for example, here in Italy, we changed the mindset about organizing festival. Some years ago, improv festival were more gathering for improvisers, and there were not so many festivals. Now we have 2 or 3 big festivals which are organized with citizens, for citizens. So for example, the one I organize is in the middle of Italy, and we work very strictly with the town, so that the shows are for the citizens of the town and are totally free. Okay, so that, for example, we have 350 people coming from all Italy and whatever to make workshops and things like this. But the shows at the evening are in a main square of this little town, totally free, so that people can see, for example, Patty Styles or who's there in that time, totally free, and see, okay, this is improv. And this is a way to make the scene growing and to make people know something a little bit more interesting about improv. Now, when we talk about improv with the mayor of that town or of another town, I can't tell now, but they know very well what we are doing. So they, for example, they give money, they help us in organizing and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So this is another way to make improv scene grow, I think.
I think that's really important. I think that is a big issue, is that as improvisers, we are mostly performing to other improvisers. It can be very difficult to get, just the general public that have not been involved with improv in any way to come along to an improv show, because the parameters for it are just like, well, I don't know what that is. I know what a comedy show is, I know what a theatre show is, but I don't know what improv is. And so I don't know what to expect going in. I was having a conversation with a couple of the people from Not All Men Improv, and they were saying that one of the problems at their shows was they were in like a very small space, and everybody filled from the back because nobody wanted to sit in the front rows because they were afraid that they would get picked on, like at a comedy gig. So that was their frame of reference, was like, oh, this must be like stand-up comedy. So I can't sit at the front because they'll just be like, right, I'm going to pull you up on stage, or I'm going to, make fun of you. So I think in including people like that.
Definitely. I mean, it is trying to get it out, especially with our show. It's really hard to kind of publicize. So it's one of these things, it's just like, oh, it's that somebody mentioned in one of our forums is that we were going to trademark the term. It's, have you seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's like that, because everybody always says that. And it's like, so what we did for a while is that we were doing open, like stand-up opening spots, like not Beat the Frog, but like new materials. We were doing bits and games with them, getting more people. But the one good thing, there's many different good things, but as I mentioned, Comedy Sports is a family friendly, so it's comedy for everybody. And we do Edinburgh every year. And so I started at the very early days. We were in the back room of a pub a million miles away from the Royal Mile. And that has built and built and built every year to where we have returning customers who are like, oh, we saw you last year. Yeah. And this is the rest of the family. And so they just start bringing, and it is that kind of word of mouth. There's always that like tongue-in-cheek thing that we say as well. It's like, oh, if you really enjoyed it, bring your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell somebody you don't like, and then they'll come. And it's that kind of, we have to, unfortunately, at the moment, because there isn't that, there's only that really one point of reference that we can use, it is word of mouth, unfortunately. Like trying to get people, I went to see Ostentatious in Edinburgh, and I was like, you have to go and watch this, it's amazing. And my friends are just like, improvise Austin? No. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it is that, and like you're saying, it's getting it out into the wider audience, but getting it also into education. I know Felix, who Jess, is doing a lot of work with Leeds University about how you can apply improv in teaching, like not drama, but just in teaching, and the benefits of improv in a wide range of different businesses and jobs can be amazing and fundamental in making sure that your job succeeds going further. And I just think it's a massive resource that some people haven't tapped into. So.
It's interesting how you reminded me of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and sort of flyering and things like that. It's interesting how there are two things that people have incredibly strong opinions on. Like if you were to flyer somebody, say, hey, stand-up comedy, or here's a sketch show or something like that, they might go, yeah, maybe have a look at it. But people have incredibly strong reactions to two things. One, improvisation. Two, a cappella. In my opinion, for good reasons, for the a cappella. Wow. But you have that thing of like, oh no, I don't like improvisation. And sort of after they've walked away and they're out of earshot, you was like, oh, don't you like art? Oh, I've seen an art. I saw a painting once. But yeah, it's so interesting that like the perception is still sort of so small but growing, that if you don't like Whose Line Is It Anyway, or you don't like the idea of being picked on, or your kind of concept of what improvisation is, then you're going to kind of jump to a judgment, which is a weird irony about improvisation as well. As like that's one of the things that we talk about the most as well, is like, have you heard the whole offer? Have you listened to the whole thing? Do you understand what they're saying?
As you were saying a little while ago, Jonah, about getting it into the kind of the academic realm, there is still so much like work to be done there, even just in it being understood the terms of improv being understood in an academic way, I wrote a journal paper which eventually got accepted and eventually got published, but one of the reviewers, their comment was that they were offended by the language that I had used, and it had no place in an academic article. Because what I was talking about was that I, along with some colleagues, we run some sessions on using improv skills to help with public speaking for researchers so that they can be better equipped to go out to conferences and things and talk about their research comfortably and stand up in front of a big audience. And because some of the exercises that we do in these sessions are about looking silly and feeling foolish and all of those sort of things, I had used those terms to describe, you know, the things. And this person's thing was that it was offensive that I had thought that this was appropriate to include in an academic article. This
quick question: were you using Rachel's notebook where it just said tits?
it just says
Yeah.
tip.
How many times did you use the word banana?
Yeah. I mean, I've got, Jess, you know my other catchphrase for, I used to be part of a team, and actually I've got it very close to filler. So when I teach, I'm very enthusiastic about, you know, I nearly said a bad word, if it messes up, take a bow, own it when it goes wrong, revel in being wrong, because you don't have to do it again, okay? And this term of phrase, which Jess kindly embroidered, is balls to the wind. Because when I was teaching, I couldn't think of balls to the wall and throw caution to the wind, like just go with it. So I was just like, balls to the wind. But I was saying it to like grown adult, like this. I've been saying it for
adults.
Yeah, and like really. And it was just like, yeah, that's what I'm saying from now on. And I said it so many times that that's not only the piece of art that I've got it on, I've got other bits where other past people have sent it me. But yeah, and sometimes to get across, you know, sometimes I think art and theatre sometimes is seen as this highbrow, like opera, blah, 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 you know, like, I can't do Shakespeare, I can't read Shakespeare. Well, you're not supposed to read Shakespeare, you're supposed to watch Shakespeare. Like, and like Mauro was saying, like some people, to improvise is life. Just play a character. Like I walk down the street, some days I'm just like, I don't want to walk normally. I'm going to pretend that I've got like hot pokers in my feet and I'll walk down the street really funny. That's improvising, right? So I think sometimes art and theatre is put on this, you know, pedestal that some people who I think will be incredible doing improv don't even contemplate going to a theatre or feel comfortable going to a theatre. So sometimes that's the stigma that's attached to improv. It's just like, well, it's going to be too funny for me, or it's going to, you know, like if it's ostentatious, I'm not going to understand it. Well, yeah, you watch Pride and Prejudice, the film, this isn't any different, but I do think that sometimes the audience or our perceived audience see that it's not going to be for them, and that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah. I think applied improv is something that's super tempting to get into. So I think like I was a few years in, and with the company that I was working with, got offered the chance to go and facilitate a corporate workshop. And I really enjoyed it, and I super duper believed in it, but it did also make me feel a little bit like sort of a 20th century medicine man going from town to town, where I've got this elixir. Oh, you're scared of public speaking? Here, have some improv. Is, you know, you feel uncomfortable with you know, your space around you. Here, have some improv. You feel like you're apologizing too much. Here, have some improv. So it was like it's this really sort of narrow line of what people feel like they're going to get out of it, and especially with applied improv, where you're not necessarily creating a performance space, and then also, yeah, comparing what they think they want to get out of it to what it potentially can actually offer them and how beneficial it actually is.
Yeah, it's not too far away from cognitive behavioral therapy, really. Like as teachers, we're not teaching you how to be funny, we're teaching lifelong behavioral change, you know. Mauro, I've got a question about the festivals that you're running. Did you find that sort of the townsfolk, I'm imagining a very quaint Italian village here, cobblestones, a little well in the center, some statues and stuff.
Some Roman.
Yeah. I presume there'd be Romans
like
there
that.
somewhere. Yeah.
Like that.
Did the townspeople involve themselves in workshops as well? Did they sort of dive in that far?
No, we tried every year to make some workshop for the people, but since now it never happened. And for the edition, for the last year edition, we made lots of projects to involve people into workshop, but Corona came. So the edition was totally, how do you say, fucked up? So
Yeah, very eloquent.
Yes.
English great on that point, Mauro.
Okay.
Yeah.
The balls were to the wind.
The
Yeah,
balls were
No, the wrong application.
No, but about Apply Improv, you know what's funny here in Italy? There is a difference between Italy and, for example, UK or USA, because in Anglo-Saxon countries, you play improv at the high school, right? Or sometimes in US maybe
in
more.
US, yeah.
In US.
In US, in Canada too.
Yeah.
So they have just like this image about something that you play in high school or university. But here in Italy, no, it never happened. So when we talk about improv, for example, in a university where I work, we apply improv for public speaking, and they took it very serious. They are like, oh, this is a new way to talk about how to improve our way to talk about people. Yes, it's a new way. It's magic. Okay. And so they took it very serious. And for example, with companies, when we work with companies, or I don't know, everyone is like jabbed about improv. They say, that's very interesting, I should apply it with my clients. Yes, maybe, but not with the ball, the red one. No, don't do this with. Yeah, trust me, this is a game, okay? But there is this kind of difference between US and Italy, or Canada and Italy, or French and Italy, because in Italy, improv came from France, not from US, but from France. And in France, there is this huge scene. They make these huge shows with huge audience, about theater with 500, 600 people in to come to see improv. So yes, and in Italy, some shows has the same audience. For example, the improv musical, or we have lots of match di improvvisazione teatrale, which are something like theater sport, but it's not. They are fighting. Don't ask me about that. And when we play that show, we have audience with 400, 500 people. And that's the way from France. So we know that it's possible to have this mentality, this mindset, and this marketing for improv, because in France there is.
Mm.
I thought of a really positive thing about kind of, I mean, this is harking all the way back to the original, like Tom was asking about making it more widespread. I think, you know, countercultures are always absorbed by the mainstream and then it kind of trickles down and things like that. So in my experience as a kind of actor, performer, improv actually is widely utilized in the industry, because the British kind of acting and film industry, I mean, it's almost, you know, it's now inseparable from the US acting industry in many ways. Like the way in which we audition or send a self-tape is very similar nowadays. Once upon a time, British actors had a black and white headshot, and now it's all color, and now it's landscape. And so like everything is kind of cross-pollinating. And so that very American way of working, which is like people, as you say, Mauro, you know, 90% of people who went to college in the States probably were peripherally aware of an improv team or did it. If they didn't, they were in the a cappella team, right?
Yeah.
So and then that obviously filters into the creative industries, and we know, you know, the kind of the main pinnacle is Saturday Night Live, and there's hundreds of other examples of just how writers' rooms work in the US, and how that is starting to, it's what works like that in the UK a lot more. And so there've been a few occasions, even meager actors such as myself have been invited into kind of workshop scripts and things like that. So I think and 99% of all commercial acting castings are improvisation, and they ask for improv chops and improv skills and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think the British industry, or like the film and TV kind of comedy industry, is using it, and eventually other industries will take notice even more.
Yeah. Because what else is an interview but an improv? You know, like a job interview, you know, it's just like,
Right.
it's all improv. Well, that's what I'm hoping. I've got one coming up, so I'm just going to improv my way through it as if I know what I'm talking about.
I have a slightly unrelated thing with that, is that I was interviewing for new members for a committee in work. And I went to these really fantastic accessibility workshops to learn more about how to make these processes easier for people. And I sent all of the questions that I was planning on asking in advance so that people could sort of prepare. And my boss was like, well, don't you want them to be able to sort of think on their feet? I'm like, well, it's a position on an artistic committee. How much of their actual job description is asking them to improvise and try to seem impressive at the same time? No, so why sort of put that in that very sort of front part of this process as well? So I think it's really interesting how we're expected to improvise on a day-to-day basis because that's the way these processes work, when in fact, you know, we're also sort of somehow rejecting it a little bit. It's like, no.
Well, unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our time together. So I'm just going to give you each an opportunity to plug any organizations or groups or anything that you want to plug, or anything that you've got coming up. So who would like to go first? Oh, come on, you must have things coming up.
We're all pretending to be shy.
Oh, you're
Ready your shy shoulders.
I'll plug two things. So I have a new improv project that is kind of at the moment under the radar, except for now it won't be. It'll be on the
We've got a
off
scoop.
the radar.
I've got an exclusive.
Yeah, so I have an improvised cartoon series which is on YouTube called Impro Tunes. Obviously, right? What else would you call it? And they're sort of 30 seconds to a minute long sketches. Series 1 was sort of finished, and series 2 is coming out kind of mid-April. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that I'm working on most. And, you know, various classes that I'm teaching with the nursery are all really, really fun. And the nursery allowed me to kind of teach really weird, beautiful niche stuff, like Wes Anderson improv or screen acting or all sorts of kind of insane things. So check those out.
Awesome, thank you. Who's next?
Okay. And with Hello Jenny's, we are organizing an online festival in the end of March, which is Let's Talk About Sex. And the topic is sex and improv. And so we all have several different interesting people. For example, from UK, Davidson,
Stephen
and
Jenkins, yeah.
yes, Stephen Davidson and Rhiannon Jenkins, with a workshop on how to be sexy on stage, and Hila Di Castro from Israel with improv and intimacy, and Uri Lifshitz from Israel too, with interesting BDSM rules to apply on improv. And we will have even a show online, which is Testo.
Tell me more.
Testo
Carry on.
is from two funny girls, which are Annalisa Rione and Elena. And it's a show about taboos and from, a natural point of view. So they talk about sex and things like this, and it's an improv show. So let's talk about sex. It's an improv festival coming here.
The marketing for it just writes itself.
Yeah.
I want to say,
Get
yeah.
so many
Sign me
people
up. I'm like, yeah.
Coming soon was the
Oh,
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jess.
Sorry. I would ask you all to follow Casino Improv. So at the moment we have a live show on Facebook every week called The Children of Captain One Track Wish to Say Goodnight. And we're also doing a soap opera, an improvised soap opera that's going to be coming out very soon in association with the Old Courts in Wigan. I'm also on a show, if there's any UK people who are super nocturnal, I'm on a team called Disaster Time, which is the Choose Your Own Adventure show that I mentioned before. So that's on today, tomorrow at 4 a.m. for the 4th of March. So please feel free to go onto the Twitch channel for the Pack Theatre in California for that. And I'm also in this cool new a cappella group, guys. And I'm really looking forward to you all coming in and seeing me. Actually, sorry, I know that we're plugging. If I can guess up a company called Acaprov, led by Lisa Lynn, and they do improvised a cappella musicals, and they are brilliant. So I just want to put that in this space.
Thank you for that. That was like BBC levels of balance there.
Well done.
Excellent. Thanks, Jess. Rachel.
Yeah, so for mine it's just look up Comedy Sports with a Z at the end. We're on everything like Twitter. We do our main shows are family friendly. They're generally on a Saturday evening around about 7, but then we do other shows that I think we do an improvised Star Trek episode, which I think is the 16th of this month. We also do non-family friendly improv, which gets really weird. Like it's letting children play in mud and it just gets really dirty very quickly. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, everybody. It's been so lovely to chat with you all. The next one of these is going to be on the 17th of March, but I will put it all over the Glossop Improv page. We also have a show tomorrow evening. We've got a little something special at 7:30, and then at 9 o'clock you can go and see Casino Improv. What a wonderful night tomorrow night. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for joining me, lovely improvisers. So let's say goodbye to Facebook for now. Bye, Facebook.
Bye, Facebook. Thank you.